Hey everyone, quick note. Our charity of focus this month is the Because organization. You can go to becauseorganization.org to learn more about and participate with this wonderful charity based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that's working with survivors and victims of human trafficking, particularly those who have gotten out of those situations and are now building and rebuilding their lives. The aftercare portion of this a huge problem is something that is often neglected and not talked about quite as much as the actual existence of trafficking. So go to becauseorganization.org once again to learn more about them and get involved in helping this cause.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back to The Broken Brain. It's your friend and mine, me. That's how I introduce myself today. So we're going to go with that. It's me, Dwight, here again for your look at psychology and culture. And we are lucky enough today to talk to my new friend and yours, Cedric Bertelli. Did I say your name right? I should have asked.
You said it right for sure. You sure did. You sure
Thank goodness. I always like to clarify that before, and I did not really do that, although you did say it. So I was trying to do it right. But Cedric is so gracious to join us today. He's the founder and director of Emotional Health Institute and has also pioneered the use of what he calls emotional resolution, or IMRES. If you don't spell it out, you say it, right? IMRES?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
IMRES.
And which is something that goes along with just self kind of intervention as well as intervention sessions for self-positive feedback. And particularly, it seems aimed in the areas of trauma and overcoming things that are resistant to healing internally for our emotional world. I'll let you, obviously, we'll get more in depth into that. But Cedric, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Dwight. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Could we start out by telling people a little bit about yourself and where you come from and how you got into working in this field?
Yeah. Well, I was born in France. This is my second career. Until 2009, I was working for the Ritz-Carlton Company. I was director of restaurants for them here in California. And in 2009, different things happened, and I decided to change career and to shift my attention toward emotions for different reasons. I mean, economy was going down, so I wasn't, my belief was not congruent with the company anymore. I was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff myself, anxiety, self-directed anger, and also the fact that working in big hotels, we can see that you're managing emotions more than people. And as a manager, that's something that always interested me to see where people were coming from, not their history so much, but the emotional dynamic that was taking places in the workplace. So I quit my job in 2009, and I started studying what you can call somatic therapy. I studied, and in 2019, I opened the Emotional Health Institute in collaboration with Dr. Jacques Fumex in France, and a couple of other professionals. And now the Emotional Health Institute is operating out of the USA, France, and Japan since last year.
It's very fascinating that you bring that up, because I have noticed that there are a lot of similarities between psychological services, therapy, and other service-oriented professions. If you think about it, it really boils down to being a service-oriented profession. It's just a different type of service where, I mean, we have more of a direct crossover. Obviously, it's a healthcare service, but yet, as I've known, you mentioned working in hospitality and kind of management of that you are dealing with a lot of emotional stuff that's going on. And I can only assume that applies not only to customers, but it's a rigorous thing on staff as well, if you were involved in management of people who work in those areas.
Absolutely. And I would say there's not a week then you have a staff member sitting in front of you and just like opening, wide open, right? Like something is happening at home, something is happening at work with the children. And I mean, I would say every week, if not more than once a week, like somebody's just like crack open, and you need to learn without any training, because we don't train people like this in management, to be present for the person. And the best you can do is to just be attentive, and be genuine about it.
Yeah, especially when promotion to management usually comes from being good at the sort of practical content of your job, and then all of a sudden you get into this sort of like sort of therapy adjacent chair where someone's sitting across from you needing that kind of support. That's very interesting. I've met many people in the food service industry, particularly like bartenders, and also interestingly enough, cosmetologists, people who work on your hair and nails and stuff. People very much open up in those instances with another intimate space, type of service that you have there. If you think about it, if you take care of how people sleep and eat in that industry, that's very interesting. And then and also not seeing them at their best. You know what I mean?
That's
people
right.
are going to treat the hospitality employees a little differently than they might treat even their neighbors or other people around them.
That's right. But you mentioned bartenders. I mean, it's a joke, right? In the business, bartenders are like therapists. People have a couple of drinks and then for some of them, they just open up. And they can talk all night long and they're coming back. Of course, the booze is helping, but the booze is just taking off some of the inhibition. And same thing for cosmetology. People are very, very vulnerable in a way. They're sitting here, they're trapped, they can't go anywhere. And what do? Somebody's with them, they're in presence of another human beings, and then things just happen magically. Especially if it's not forced.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me how people have varied experiences coming into working in mental health and how good it is. I will say, there's Chris Tittle is an individual who's come on the program before, but he was an intern that worked for me, and I've talked about this before. His background before he got his therapy degree was he worked in business logistics with like the Defense Department on an Air Force base nearby.
Wow.
Made a change into that field, and he was, I would say one of the best therapists I've ever known, and particularly supervised and taught, and I've learned a lot from him during the internship process when he worked for me. So it's very interesting to me how people carry that over, and I think sometimes those of us over here who've been in mental health our whole lives benefit from having that perspective when we either spend time outside just that field or networking. Anyway, it's something that's kind of near and dear to me. Now, I'm curious, when you made a pivot, how did you mentioned already seeking out experts that you worked with, and it sounds like maybe studied with, and did you find there was your sort of new educational process, I guess? Was that a challenge, or how did you approach that?
Well, I guess it was a challenge to go back into a student position again and to have to learn something completely new. It was a challenge, but it also was so rich, so different that I dived into it. I dove into it, and I wrapped myself inside of it, and it just was an evidence for me. That's what I wanted to do, and I became more and more curious, looking at different things. We went from working with physical therapist to working with psychologist, then looking into neuroscience with Lisa Feldman Barrett, Damasio, all this. So it was a brand new world that was opening up to me. And I think, as you said, the fact that I'm coming from a different background, I don't know if it helped me, but at least I was very curious, because all I've learned in school was about food and booze, right? I went to a culinary school. So you open up the Pandora box, and it was interesting for me. It still is today.
Wow, it's fascinating to see. Now, did you gravitate right away towards working with things like trauma or the types of things that you work with now, or did you go through kind of different aspects of the field?
At first, it was anxieties, because anxiety was what's really was present for me. So it was dealing with anxiety. How can we deal with anxiety? And was something that obsessed me is, well, I did psychotherapy for myself. I did several things, of course, and I work with psychotherapists. But it's always controlling, right? We learn to control very often, to control our anxiety, to notice our anxiety. And in my mind, the obsession was, how can we stop controlling and stop feeling it? Stop feeling it when it's not necessary. And this is when I move into something more somatic and meeting people that work with the body, with sensations, interoception, and little by little, that's what created MRAS.
Interesting. Somatic techniques are something that it's coming up more and more. It's kind of always been around, but
always, yeah.
But being pulled into the sort of center stage of therapy, you see people incorporating, whether it's through EMDR or other kind of forms of that, just like, but there's so many more movement based type of things and the use of that as well. But so maybe break down for people a little bit about that. How would you define the use of somatic therapy in the way that we work?
Yeah, I can only really talk about what we do, which is emotional resolution. It is somatic in the sense that we work with sensations, but there is no movement. If there's no motion of the body, it's solely based on how the brain constructs emotion. Today we know how the brain constructs emotion. A couple of things, if I may, at the origin of any debilitating emotional pattern is always, for what we understand today, an instant of trauma. Now, what is trauma is an instant that holds too much stress, physical or emotional, for us to take on when we experience it. We understand that during an instant of trauma, there is an instant of dissociation. I mean, the cognitive brain disconnect. We understand that the brain, one of the main jobs of the brain is to predict constantly. The brain constantly predicts. It's a prediction machine. And there I will refer to Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made, out of Boston. So she's, I think, the pope of the neuroscience of emotion, and Antonio Damasio, of course. I don't know if it's a pope for a lady, but the lady pope of the neuroscience of emotion.
There's a book, right?
How Emotions Are Made. Yeah. And she's fascinating in her study and research. And what we understand as well is the capacity of the subconscious mind, right? What we are aware of, like right now, is about 2,000 bits of information processed at the speed of about 150 miles per hour. But at the same time, the subconscious has a potential to gather 400 billion bits of information. A process at a speed of 150,000 miles per hour. These are numbers from the Penn University. They're a little old. They're from 2012, but it's always the same kind of balance between what we can cognitively be aware and subconsciously. So what is happening is during any instant of trauma, the cognitive shutdown, we go into a short dissociation. Now the subconscious takes over. So it gathers all the elements present around us, but in a non-linear way. It gathers all the elements present and that we can capture through the five senses. What we see, what we smell, what we taste, I don't know, the shadows, the temperature. It's, imagine like a whirlpool open in the brain that gather all information available through the five senses, but at super high definition, a definition that is not really understandable, 400 billion bits of information per second. And the brain also records the physical sensation that we feel at this instant of trauma. Yeah. Later on, when we are exposed to one or several elements that the brain recognizes were present during a specific trauma, the brain is going to generate instantly, is going to predict instantly the interoception, so the physical sensations that we are about to feel based on what was felt during a specific trauma.
And that's that's what interoception.
That's exactly it. Interoception is the physical sensation that make us realize that we feel something. So when the brain recognizes one or several elements that were present during a trauma, it's going to predict what physical sensation you're about to feel and generate those physical sensations. That's what let us know that we feel an emotion.
So this is very important, I think, is to me that's a key of some of these modern type of therapies that you're talking about, this approach of using the sensations and those things as, first of all, as informational. I'm feeling something physically that ties in, instead of just feeling like, oh, I'm feeling something physically, period. It's like using that to guide. And essentially, I think you're talking about kind of using that to sort of like going the other way back of like, here's this physical sensation, it informs me, but then it's also useful to work with that sensation as a way to attach to the emotions as well, right? It goes both ways.
Absolutely, man. It's for me. It's the image is quite crazy, right? When we feel anxious or angry, or whatever it is, it's like the way that I see it in my mind is like the body becomes like a time machine. These sensations were felt in your body maybe when you were 1 or 2 or 3 years old, or maybe 20. It doesn't matter. These are the same sensations that were felt during a specific trauma. Now, these are only predictions, and the key of MRS is this: debilitating emotional patterns stay in us because we constantly control the prediction. That means we never let the brain and the body generate the prediction until the end. We always control it. Deep breath, we scream, we keep it inside, we control the environment that creates the emotion. what we're doing in MRS is very simple, actually. We are allowing the body to go to the end of the prediction. That means to feel all the sensations without interference from the practitioner or from the client themselves. To let the prediction plays out until the end, that takes never more than 90 seconds, 90. At the end of the prediction, the brain is anticipating to be hit by some kind of danger. Now, at the end of the prediction, nothing happens. The clients or we are safe and sound. From that very instant, what used to be taken as a stimulus by the brain becomes a non-event. The prediction is updated.
It's fascinating the way that you are. So the element of control in the environment, the amount of control that we have in the expression of those things, it sounds like you're saying it's greater than we think it is while we're in the midst of that trauma flashback, so to speak. Like as you put it, we make a choice of an action or we do something. Would you say though it happens so fast and just becomes habitual to where we don't think of it as control? If I scream or if I have an anger episode or something, I'm not really thinking about what control I have because it feels so automatic.
That's automatic. And also we've been taught to control our emotion one way or another for what we call emotional regulation from very early on. Our teachers at school, in preschool and so on, our parents. I mean, we've been taught to regulate our emotion, right? Take a breath, count until 10. Even screaming when we're upset is a way to control the tension we have in our body. Why do we explode? Because we have an accumulation of tension and we release it. It's a way to control. So we can control. Go ahead.
No, just what is that? That's the formation of what we in CBT they call it automatic thinking, right? But I always like to look at it and say automatic thinking isn't really. It's not intrinsically automatic. It's just something we've done so many times we no longer notice that we're doing it. It seems like it's happening to us. Is that along the lines of what you're saying?
100%. 100%. And I think the art of MRS is that, right? There's several things in MRS is how to retrigger properly an emotion. So the brain, regenerate the exact interoception that we need to resolve, and how the practitioner, by his positioning as a practitioner, do not interfere with the client's body process, and for the client not to interfere with their own body. Right? It's uncomfortable, those sensations. That's why we act on them. But those sensations, they are harmless. They're just sensations. They are ghosts, so to speak. It's like ghost coming from a long time ago or not so long ago, but they're just ghosts. Mm-hmm. The thing is, most of the emotional difficulties we experience are not congruent with our current reality. And the goal of MRS is to follow. Sorry, I speak too much. I apologize. The goal of MRS is to really be able to feel the physical sensations or to feel the emotions that are congruent with what's happening today instead of reacting from the past.
And when we learn something through a traumatic experience, it's generally something we learn to do for survival purposes, or at least that's the intention at that time. Sure. And many times I like to borrow an old-fashioned phrase where they talk about being sane in an insane place. And that's what I think of as trauma flashbacks and things. It's like at the time may have been a completely appropriate reaction, is something that maybe I felt or did or expressed that maybe it kept me sane at the time, or maybe it made sense in a toxic environment or something. To put it, in sort of old school combat PTSD terms, it's like you act different on the battlefield. And when you get home, it's not a battlefield. And so those things you learn to do don't apply anymore. They're not healthy anymore. And they're not adaptive, right? And they don't represent the current reality, as you put it.
That's right. I often tell my clients, we keep on dying from events that we survived a long time ago. We survived trauma and what we remember and what we don't remember. And there is a study that came a couple of years ago from France by a wonderful, wonderful guy called Boris Cyrulnik. He's in his 80s now. He's a psychiatrist. His whole work is about resilience. And he shows how the first 1,000 days of life, I mean, from conception and 1,000 days after, are an absolutely, quote unquote, wonderful garden for trauma, right? Because we are so vulnerable. So there is the trauma that we remember from childhood, teenage time, and all the one that we don't remember because they were too intense or we were too young,
Absolutely. And that's where you get into this thought that it used to be, I remember being taught this at some point, that if you didn't have a sort of a literal memory, particularly, before age 3, we don't tend to form visual memories. And even with, whatever, it is like, if you don't have a actual strong memory of the trauma, it doesn't affect you. But I think modern research and things has shown that that is not true. And even if we're not consciously thinking about it a lot, there is, as you're putting it, like these effects that we retain in our bodies, right? And we
absolutely.
have that trauma response.
I think it starts. I mean, I'm not the only one thinking it. I mean, there's a lot of research right now. Cyrilnik, Ludwig Janus in Germany, that show that, I mean, the body retains memory almost, not too long after conception. Like it's quite amazing, yeah. And of course, it's not memory with images, or it's all sensory. We are bathing into constantly an environment of sensations in the womb, at birth, afterwards. And then the bath of sensations change, right? First is, the belly, being in the amniotic liquid, and then it's the touch from the parents. Then the words become the environment. It's fascinating. And yeah, a lot of them we don't remember. We don't remember what happened to us.
Yeah. Yes.
And we don't need to. That's the beauty of this work, right? You don't need to know where it's coming from.
And that's another great innovation, I think, in modern times. The old school trauma focused CBT work, one of the big things that I know kept people from treatment sometimes, because I've had people tell me this when they come in and say, now you're going to make me do this, is the thought process of what they called the trauma narrative. That was a big thing. Yeah. It was like, no way around it. You're going to have to tell the story verbally. You're going to have to write it down and then tear it up and write it down again, and then tear it up and then write it down again, and eventually sit down with a trusted person and read it to them. And you're going to have to habituate yourself, almost an exposure technique, until, and let me put it this way. It's not that it didn't work for anyone, but there are many people who didn't find it as helpful. And there's many, I believe, this is no way to measure this, I don't think, but there were many, there's probably some way to measure it. I'm not a researcher. Anyway, but there were many people who kept themselves or even their loved ones or children out of therapy because they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want my kid to go through that. They're telling me I don't want to go back and talk about this 16 more times. Okay, I don't want to see them hurt. And that what to me was one of the biggest ill effects of that, even more than, because once again, when people embraced it and they went through it, many people report that was helpful to them. I'm one of those. I don't like to take a big dunk on CBT too much, because it's done a lot to help people over the years when we didn't have these other techniques.
Absolutely.
But there's an outdated nature to the concept that I have to tell the story ad nauseum. As you're putting it, it's not even really, even if I'm just like, I have this response, I don't really know why. I see a green pickup truck and I go into this feeling. I don't know why I picked that as a stimulus, but whatever. It could be whatever, right?
It can be a smell, and that's right.
Oh, why? Oh my gosh, what?
A sound or the type of guy. For example, I'm a short guy, right? I'm 5'6", and I was bullied in buses as in middle school, and as an adult, as a young adult, I didn't have any tall friends. Like every time I had an employee, either it was taller than me, like my colleagues were making fun of me because they knew I'm going to be a hard ass on them for no good reason, right? Just because the guy was bigger than me. Up until my early 30s, I didn't have a friend of mine that was really bigger than me. Like we were like a bunch of dwarf, it's to make a joke, but it's just because what I mean is, there is something that we know, and I didn't realize that consciously, right? I didn't realize that consciously, but emotions do not make sense. And very often, we don't realize that we have an emotion. For example, you and I, we might meet, and I might see you, and when I come close to you, I might feel tension. And why do I feel tension? It has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's a smell that you have that reminds my brain of a kid that was bullying me. Maybe is the shape of your body, whatever it is. But I'm going to come close to you. I'm going to feel tension. I'm going to make a story about it. I'm going to say, well, I don't know about Dwight. I have a bad feeling about him. I don't trust him. All it is that your body, something within you, is creating tension in me. Now, I'm going to take those tensions. I'm going to conceptualize it. And that's going to already build a dynamic between us.
And
it
so
has nothing to do with you.
Decision before making the decision.
That's right.
Like on an awareness level.
That's right, because my body is screaming, like, don't get close to this guy. But for no good reason at all. As you said earlier, my body is trying to protect myself based on an outdated prediction.
Back many years ago, I had a guest on talking about sexual abuse and as a survivor of molestation and becoming a therapist. And she shared this story where she'd gone through her whole adulthood believing that she was not a touchy-feely person. She was like, I don't like to be touched. I'm not a hugger. I don't even like to shake hands. And then at some point through some series of self-healing kind of exercises and things in her own growth, she recognized that she had craving for physical affection, she remembered and talked to other family members who, before the abuse, which happened at a very young age, she was a hugger. She was a cuddler. She was, just all up on mom and, whatever. And so she said that was something that was taken by her trauma. And so she started to kind of get back into like with safe people, right?
Yes.
Having physical affection and becoming that hugger and realizing that, well, my nature is actually to be a hugger. And I didn't know it and would never have said, I'm not a hugger. I mean, maybe sort of like tangentially, like, yeah, I guess it might be related to the abuse, blah, blah, blah. But like to say, oh, wait, it was at that deep, deep level.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting when you talk about that reaction, even just being around tall folks.
I think trauma is taking pieces of our life, right? It's like during those more dissociations, it's like pieces of your life are being taken away. And all we do with MRES is reintegrating these pieces. So we are a bit more whole again, right? So we this moment that stole pieces of life, we recover them. So we can learn from them instead of reacting from them.
Now, how do you help people getting into, for example, take that realization? I don't hang out with tall people. I'm intimidated by Dwight's towering 5'10". No way, that doesn't work. But anyway, no. How did you tie that in to say this is something that I want to work on as part of MRES or part of, how do you draw that out? Because there's so many things that we may not even, as you put it, not even be aware of. How do we get aware of that?
Well, I mean, I think it's gradual. At the beginning, when it comes to myself, I worked on the emotions that were on my face. Anxiety, anger, like the stuff that I realized. And then when I felt in my being that what I worked on actually did not come back, changed me. Like, I don't feel anxious. I don't feel anxious to talk to you right now. When before that would have been very difficult for me to have this conversation. I'm not afraid to talk in public. When I realized on this, then, well, of course, you do your own work, right? And you read authors. For me, François Rostand, with the French philosopher and psychologist, was a big influence for me. You start to question your beliefs, and you start to look at things. Why is it that, like, big people? Yeah, I know I don't like bigger people because at some point when I was 10 or 11, they used to prey on me. For some reason why they were preying on me. It was all other short people that didn't get preyed on. So then you start asking questions and realizing, when do I feel in a funk? When do I start feeling tense? When I come close to people? When I play a sport, I was to do martial art and the opponent is bigger, I'm not myself. I'm not relaxed. I'm tensing right away. So I'm going to take a specific situation when I feel tense. And from this specific situation, reliving the specific situation, we're going to trigger the interoception that we usually feel in this situation. And then we're going to just let the interoception plays out until the end. So feeling attentively what's going on within without interfering with it. And so it's questioning.
Go ahead.
No, it's just questioning that. Stop believing that it is the way it is. Stop believing that I am an angry person. No. That doesn't exist. We become angry because something happened, because we're afraid. Why? Don't need to know why. I'm not an anxious person. Anxious people do not exist. They became anxious because something happened to them. Why? It doesn't really matter. We can resolve it. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. And this is where, like you can see that this mental health understanding, psychological literacy, understanding ourselves, this kind of exploration, it leads to things on a personal level that have to do deeply with quality of life and the way we relate to people. But you can see how this amplifies on a societal level. as you were talking, I couldn't help but think of a lot of young people I have worked with, particularly young men, who get swept up in sort of some of the tendencies that we have around now to some of the movements to be like very, very angry, very, very alpha, very, very aggro, tough. You got to go back to the roots of old school toxic masculinity because, I can't get a girlfriend. So that means all women are terrible. Oh, I can't get the job I want. So that means the society's against me and whatever it is. And you see horrible kind of decisions that start being made by this and movements. You could go, boy, who's founding those movements and where does that come from? And so it has a deep, deep impact when we don't treat these things. Right.
It's fear, right? I mean, everything, like all those movement, this anger, it's most of the time, if not all the time, fear-based. It's fueled by fear. And then you conceptualize it in another way. You find reason why, you point finger. And it's funny to see that human beings operate well when it's against something else. I mean, we are always shooting each other in the legs, except when we can get together against something else, against the word, then we collaborate until we don't anymore. But it's
very, very. It has very, very deep impact. So tell me, if I come in to start like an IMRES approach to therapeutic intervention, I come into an IMRES session, what would I expect to experience as the client in that situation?
Yep. First of all, we will start by asking what is the intention, right? What is it? I often ask my clients or my students ask that as well in different way. But if we could resolve anything within you during this conversation, if everything was possible, if we could resolve anything within you, not in your life, not going to find a job for you, but within you, what is it that you would like to shift today? Clear intention is everything, because clear intention means that the person is accepting the issue, right? There's no blaming. There's no. In you, what can we shift? Then let's say most of the time people come from big emotions, right? Anger or frustration, jealousy, depression, anxiety, all those emotions that are big enough so we conceptualize them. For me, as a practitioner, this is just like a second immune system, right? Like when you have a flu, you have a fever, so you take stuff to bring the fever down. But the fever is nothing. The fever is just a symptom. Most of those big emotions that people come to see us for, they're just symptom of like antigen fear working the body underneath it. But we're going to address them because that's the intention. So we're going to start with this one emotion they want to resolve. And we're going to trigger it in the body of the person, most of the time from a specific situation when they experienced it. So never the traumatic event, but in your life currently, when did you feel it? Well, last week, 2 weeks ago, yesterday with my wife or at work. So we take a natural situation that holds a moment when the emotion was felt. From the situation, we're going to trick the brain to believe, so to speak, that the person is in front of the situation again. So the brain is going to be confused and, am I in front of this person or am I? No. So the interoception is going to be generated. So the physical sensations happen in the body again.
Is that mostly through like a visualization kind of exercise, or do you use like external things like conflict with my spouse, picture my spouse kind of thing, or just picturing it internally, those types of techniques?
We use specific, as current as possible, specific memories. So specific event. The situation has to be real. No visualization, no imagination. That doesn't work as well. Mm-hmm. And we use the five senses, right? It's important that the person is anchored within the five senses in the situation.
So more of a visualization of the actual memory. Not an imaginary visualization, but more like when I was at the store and I had a panic attack, what was I wearing? What was I feeling? What was I hearing? That kind of stuff?
That's right. Absolutely. A bit different. We found a way to make it like super sharp in a way to really trick the brain. So interoception is triggered right away. But when interoception is triggered, there is no emotion, right? The person feels sensations, and right away we bring the attention to the body. So there is no crying. There's no. The crying, the screaming is just a consequence of the emotion. The emotion is purely sensory way. So we tap into the sensations right away. Okay. So the person, to answer your question, is going to feel some sensations, and we're going to lead them so they don't touch the sensations, so that they stay with the sensations even if it's uncomfortable. And we're going to lead them in a way that is structured. I was about to say strong, in a way that they need to feel safe, right? They need to feel safe to feel, because people usually don't feel, or they're afraid of feeling. So we let them feel the sensation. Sometimes it takes a little coaching, of course, but the goal is that the person is feeling the interoceptive prediction until the end. At the end, we can verify and we know if it's resolved. From this point, we're going to use other tools. We're going to use things such as what we call impact questions. Our goal after that is going to be asking specific questions that bring emotion that were built upon this emotion they came to treat. The guilt, the shame, all those emotions, because that's the thing about human beings. We build emotion upon emotion. Something happened to us, then we become resentful and shameful and guilty and victimization. So the goal is somebody come with an issue. We're going to resolve the emotion they want to resolve. And then we're going to do our very best to resolve all the other emotion, what I call parasites emotion, that over the years were built, the belief that were built upon this thing. And we're going to resolve as many as we can.
It reminds me, I was just doing some research every week or so. I put out a little history, a little nugget of history about mental health or psychology that I drop into the podcast feed, particularly for you wonderful patrons out there who patronize the show through Patreon. And I was just researching one about Albert Ellis and rational emotive behavioral therapy. And it strikes me that as you're discussing this, it sounds like a very healthy evolution from this. We go from, just focus on thoughts only to then he introduced like using emotions. And it was essentially like he'd sit there and debate with people about their irrational beliefs. And then we go a step further. What was missing back then it sounds like you're talking about the element of the somatic, the embracing the emotion, the feeling the emotion, the sensory experience. And then you're challenging it, but with much more like modern tools and things. When you say tools, we're not just talking about sitting there and doing a worksheet.
No. There's no worksheet. We created, the Emotional Health Institute created different tools because everybody is different. And there's not such thing as a pill fix it all. So we developed about 20 different, it's difficult to put a name on it. We call them tools, but they're way to approach fears. We developed about 20 of them, and that allows us to be very versatile with the individual that we have in front of us.
It's very important, that individualization and subjectivity, another thing that was missing from old school, some of those things, because if I believe that rationality and a balanced emotional response looks the same for every single person, and I think that's one of the things that I've learned as a therapist is that every reaction or decision that we make, even the ones we think is very, very, very logical, there's some emotion, there's some experience that once again has already determined like this is the decision you should make, but before we even are aware that we're making it, in other words. And many times, I don't know if you find this, but when we actually are consciously making decisions, there's a lot of times where what we're really doing is talking ourselves into the thing that our system has already decided that we should do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree 100%.
What do you feel like is the ultimate goal of would you call it resolution? Would you call it healing? What would you call it?
Well, we call it emotional resolution because that's what we do, what we aim on doing. And for me, it's emotional resilience, right? Is allowing the body to tap into this resilience capacity that we all have. We're not doing anything. I mean, really, we are literally doing nothing as a practitioner. And that's, the same, we talk about, Peter Levine talk about it, like all these guys talk about it, in the animal kingdom, animals do not hold on to trauma because once they're back into a safe place, where the body shake or very sensations, the body doesn't just shake, a lot of physical sensations. And then the event that just was traumatic is integrated. And actually the mammals can learn from what just happened and will apply it in a similar situation, not us. We control too much. So what we're doing is tapping into this natural capacity that we all have as mammals, at least, to integrate traumatic events or stress that is too high.
How important is the belief that we can do it?
Not important at all.
Okay.
Zero. I think he has
say
zero.
a little more about that. Yeah.
Zero importance. I think what is important is, number one, to accept that we have the emotion. So to accept it doesn't mean that we like it, but to accept that we are angry, that we are afraid, to accept our dark parts, so to speak, right? Our shadows, whatever you want to call it, but to accept that, yeah, we're afraid of this, even if it's ridiculous. I'm afraid to talk to a woman, or like accept. That's the first thing. Accept the emotion, accept the issue, because if you don't accept it, you're not going to look at it. So accept it. Even if it doesn't fit with the character that you build over the years, even if it doesn't fit with the person that you put out there in the world, be honest with yourself. Accept your fear. That's number one. That's what you need. Once the fear is accepted, then it doesn't matter if the person believes they can be resolved or not.
Right. I mean, I guess in a sense, I need to believe enough to make the appointment. But but I think this helps that when you say, I love that point that, we need to at least not even believe, maybe hope enough to make a phone call and make an appointment to go in and talk to a therapist. Obviously, we have to get in the door. But I think it helps people get in the door if they know that what you just said is true, which is if I don't have a concept of how I could possibly feel better, that doesn't mean I can't. I should still go. Right. I should still embrace this feeling, even if it's terrifying, because I don't have to think. And when you get down to basics, it's so interesting to me how we are socialized to believe that we should have such control over emotions and our thoughts and our behaviors and such that even if we go and pay and hire a therapist and say, I'm feeling out of control and I need your help, we still have a part of us often that says, I got to figure this out. It's like, no, we're here. We'll figure it out together, but as you put it, they come in with expertise and you're just trying to guide them. But that thought process that we should be able to, and I also like with your model that it dispenses with that thought of like, there's no should, there's just are, you're experiencing this and we can help.
Yeah, that's right. And people that come to see me with something chronic, like chronic anxiety, chronic pain or things like that. It's one of the first thing it sounds a little strange, but one of the first thing I tell them is you got to give up hope. Because hope in a way is a poison, right? When you hope for something to get better, you're not involved in your process. Hope is just depleting from a ton of energy that you can use now to move from where you're at now. Just accept the chronic anxiety, accept the wound of the trauma, accept it. Hoping that it's going to get better, hoping that I'm going to help you, deplete the energy. No. That's in you. That's going to happen now, not in the future.
It's a powerful thing and a powerful thought to think that we can start having impact pretty much all right away, to have some impact and some ability right away to interact with these emotional responses so that they're not governing our lives. And once again, I think it's very much in line. People listening out there are probably sick of hearing me mention, but EMDR and IFS, for example, those are two. Mm-hmm. They strike me as a lot of similarities in the ways that you approach it. And those are all things that kind of the core expectation is that we should hopefully have some impact today. If I'm sitting here doing an exercise and doing a session, it's not that I walk out and everything's fine, but it's like I should already feel like I'm getting some tools and a handle on the situation. And I very much, I think that's, it's very much in line with what we're seeing research and things too. So I appreciate what you're doing and the fact that that's something that you've specialized and worked on so much over the years. We want to make sure to tell people where they can find you and follow your work. Of course, I always have my little standard question I like to ask everybody before that, which is there a way of giving back to the community, whether through charitable work or a charity organization that you love, or just a recommendation for a good community practice that you would share with the listeners out there?
Yeah. So what I do is so I go to the YMCA. And in the Y, often, at least in the one I go, there's, elders, elder men. I gravitate toward men because, that it's the conversation goes like this. And when there's like elder guys who are by themselves or widow or stuff like that, not every week, but as much as I can, I take them out for dinner. We spend some time, we chat, And which I try to keep this practice going. It doesn't have to be male, but it's just the way it is lately.
It's like purposeful interconnectedness with people. And what you're saying, not necessarily people that you have a pre-existing sort of knowledge of or relationship with. It's just kind of getting to touch bases with people. Yeah.
That's right. You work out with them, next to them, and you exchange a few words, and then you start to joke a little bit and say, "Hey, why don't we go have a pizza?"
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes like a tradition, and I enjoy it very much because I learn from them very much.
Yeah,
and I like to think that they enjoy to chat with me. So
that's
maybe
wonderful.
They don't.
It throws me back to some research, actually, when you go back to, in fact, I think Milgram was one of the first who did this. So this, hopefully, I don't know if this counterbalances some of the horrible things he did where he made people think they killed people with electric shock. It's a deep cut for you research fans out there. Anyway, but he did some of these studies where they would take pictures at like subway stations, and they would say how many people are the exact same people that are there every single day. And then eventually I believe in some of these studies, at least, I don't know if they were his, but they would make contact with people and say, "Do you know this person? Do you know this person? Do you know this person?" And they, I think they seem familiar, but I don't know them. And it's like, well, you see them every single day.
Every day.
Right. And so just that concept of saying, "Hey, I see you every day. What's going on? How you doing?" kind of a thing. It's just something that we don't think of a lot. So I love that. I love that tip. I appreciate that. Well, tell people where they can follow you, learn more about MRES, maybe get involved.
Yep. So to learn more about MRES, you can go to emres.com, EMRES.com, or emotionalhealthinstitute.org. It goes to the same place. And here you will learn about the work, what we do, how we do it. We have a volunteer program as well where certified practitioners are taking low income. We are a nonprofit, are taking low income clients as well, are part of their client load. And you have the explanation of how MRES work, why it works, and interviews, articles, and stuff like that. And to reach out to me directly, it's cedricbertelli.com, first name, last name.com, and that's my website.
But they can use the title of this episode to get the correct spelling, because you were able, I had the incorrect spelling on our Zoom session, so you helped me to do that anyway. But yeah, so you could use that to get to your email. You guys also have a training upcoming. Is that for clinicians?
That's correct. It's a training for clinician. We have 2 in September, I believe. One is official. The date's official, 6, 7, 8 of September. So that's the beginning of a curriculum. And it's for therapists, coaches, HR professionals, first responders, people who have a nonprofit working with veterans. So basically, we teach you how to do MRES. The curriculum is over 4 modules, and the first module of the curriculum is starting in September. We just did one last weekend, actually. So it'll be the next one.
Very interesting. And I love the discovery as well that you are a nonprofit. I feel like with plugging charities and things, we also do a monthly charity focus I'll mention here in a second. And so I always like when we can get a whole bunch of charities or nonprofits in at once. And I think that's with treatment and access to treatment, that's a wonderful thing to be able to be doing as well. So I hope everybody will check that out and follow this as well. A lot of these somatic-based therapies are game changers, not only for our industry. I think it's important for you to remember that treating trauma is treating society. We've all been through lots of trauma in the last few years, and certainly it plays a bigger role than I think we even know many times, as you've said. Well, I want to just mention a couple things for listeners that just so you know, as we're coming up on a couple of events. First, let me plug our charity of focus for this month, which is an organization called Color Outside the Lines. You can go to Color Outside Lines, however you want to pronounce it, .org if you want to learn more about their program. They are a program that uses art and murals and other crafting projects to help at-risk youth mainly in Oregon and California. Is where that is centered. We like to hit up local organizations as much whenever I mention that. And as you may know, anyone who joins our Patreon as a supporter, 50% of your donation will go towards the organization that we're featuring in the month that you join, and that's in perpetuity for as long as you're a patron. And so that gives you access to the bonus Broken Brain materials, and also you're helping. But you can also go directly to their website, of course, and donate. Get involved, share it on social media. It doesn't cost you anything. Or, use that to guide how you look for similar programs or interventions in your area. I also got to hit up, so everybody knows that at the end of August, and we have a date now for this. I didn't have one last time I mentioned it, but on Thursday, August 29th will be the third annual Broken Brain live event for International Overdose Awareness Day, in which we've been doing once again this is our third annual time. It'll be a 5-hour live stream. A lot of like former guests and friends of the show will be joining, and you, the listener, are welcome to join as well. If you go over to dwighthurst.com/live, there will be links to follow on the social media to watch. There'll also be a link where you can join, sort of like a live call-in type of thing too. You can join the live feed to share your own experiences, your own thoughts, or just hang out with us during that long time. So it's not just me having to sit there, guys. Come on, I could use your backup out there. So those are things that you can follow along with us as we do what we do here on the show. Thank you for everybody out there who listens, especially those of you that help us either by donations or by sharing the word and letting people know about the show. Really appreciate it. I think our guests do a lot of good. And of course, today is no exception to that. So Cedric, thank you so much for being here, for what you're doing, but also for sharing it with us, taking the time today to tell us about that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talking with me, and it was a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Dwight, and thank you for everything you're doing as well.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.